Hey, what say we look at some cards tonight? Because it's Common Knowledge, the show where we take a look at common Magic the Gathering cards, and I'll tell you, are they any good in the Pauper format or not, and what decks they might go in, and all that good stuff, and maybe just get a little fun nostalgia in there as well. Let's start with Destroy the Evidence, which is 4 and a black for a sorcery. Destroy target land. Ooh. Its controller reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a land card, then puts those cards into their graveyard. Interesting piece here that's both land destruction and mill. um, kind of fun. Not a very good card. I'm not here saying this card is good. It's 5 mana to destroy 1 land and mill. And if you're milling certain decks, I suppose there's like a 4 land spy deck, right? And so if they only got 4 lands in their deck, you're gonna mill a bunch of cards. Problem is, those decks want all those cards in the graveyard, so you're not really doing yourself any favors by forcing them to mill all those cards. Where else are you using that? Blue. I think mono blue, like advisors, is really where you want to go if you're doing a mill plan. So you don't really need to splash the black for any real reason. The land destruction is interesting, but if you want land destruction, there are cheaper land destruction options in black, and really the land destruction Ponza decks are gruel. So I just don't really see where this fits. It is interesting though. I do like interesting cards. The other problem here is that lands are, outside of the spy deck, lands are one of the most plentiful things in a deck, right? Like about a third of the deck is lands. Sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. And in 1 or 2 cases, a lot less. But generally, the decks play a lot of lands. So how many cards are you really milling at any one time? It's not going to be a ton. I don't know. And also just generally, a lot of decks like graveyards, a lot of Pauper decks like using their graveyards in some way. So milling isn't always the best option, in the same way that discarding isn't always the best option. The difference between mill and discard is something that they had access to in their hand right then and could have played. So discarding, sometimes it's better to have something discarded into a graveyard instead of it being accessible from their hand. But from the library to the graveyard is the graveyard is a much more playable space to interact with than your library is. Tutors, especially in Pauper, are much more rare, but things that do graveyard shenanigans in Pauper are incredibly plentiful. So, interesting little card here, but I don't think it's actually all that good. Let's give it a 2.2. Yeah, let's go 2.2 on that one. Next up is Plague Spores, originally and only from Invasion. Let's see what this is. Plague Spores is 4 and Rakdos mana, which is black and red, for a sorcery that says destroy target non-black creature and target land. They can't be regenerated. Wow, our second land destruction card in 2 cards. All right, 6 mana. You're destroying a non-black creature and a land. So they put together a Doomblade and a Stone Rain in the same card, but also a Doomblade and a Stone Rain cost 5 mana altogether, 1 in a black and 2 in a red, right? So you're paying a 6 mana for what reason? I don't know if I can tell you why. Maybe they thought the extra mana was because we didn't have Doomblade in Invasion times, right? We would have had Terror, which is non-black and not artifact creature. So maybe they thought, well, Terror's 2 mana, so if we just say non-black creature, maybe that's worth an extra mana. That's my only theory here. This card's not very good. It's just really expensive. Like, the effect is okay. It's also at sorcery speed, which, oof. I get why it's not instant speed, though. You generally don't like instant speed land destruction. That's messed up. But Yeah, this card's pretty bad. Just really expensive. Does some nice things, but it's all just costs way too much to do. You're never gonna play this card. I will give it a 1.8. No, even less than that. 1.5. Yeah, not very good. Pristine Talisman. Here we go. Here's a card. 3 mana for an artifact that taps for a colorless mana, and you gain a life. That's okay. That can be okay. You know, when you're talking about we have all sorts of options of life gain to stave off the mono red decks or really aggressive decks, and you want to have little ways of gaining life here. 3 mana to do that is asking a little bit much, but you're also getting the ramp here. You're getting a mana rock out of it, and that's okay. I think the connection, the combination of these two things is actually pretty solid, but 1 life is not really enough to stop those aggressive decks, and the ramp is generally not all that necessary. I think there's other better ways of ramping in Pauper. So I would rather have, my cleansing wildfire and my campfire instead of a pristine talisman that kind of does a poor imitation of both. Still though, I think you probably could find uses for pristine talisman. I think this was a used card back in the day sometime. I don't really know my Pauper history all that well. I've got this in a couple of commander decks that like gaining life, and it's a cool mana rock that can also do that. And I've got it in a deck with an unwinding clock as well. And if you're able to gain 4 life a turn cycle and generate 4 mana a turn cycle, that's also pretty cool. That's when it starts getting good. But I think just as a normal mana rock, especially in the Pauper format, that can be so fast, that can just really be so fast. And even when you're playing a control deck that tries to slow things down, I think this doesn't really add to your game plan as much as it needs to be an effective card to, actually keep your game plan up. I still like it though. I still like this card. I'm gonna give it a 3.1. But I think that's mostly just personally me liking the card more than it is thinking it's a good Pauper card. Feral Instinct is 1 and a green for an instant. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn, and you draw a card at the beginning of next turn's upkeep. Okay, really bad giant growth, right? You're spending twice as much as a giant growth, and you're only getting a third of the power and toughness. That's not very good, but you also get to just draw a card. And sure, that card comes at a odd timing restriction, especially for green. Green doesn't get. I think about like Arcane Denial that would have this kind of effect. But back in the Visions days, this is sometimes they would put this effect on the ways to draw cards. It's fine. It's not a huge deal, and if you're using it as a defensive combat trick, then you get the card at the beginning of your upkeep anyway. So it's like you just drew the second card. That's okay, I guess. But hey, you're drawing a card for 2 mana and you're getting a little power toughness boost. That's not terrible. It's just not that good. There's better combat tricks in green. There's better ways to draw cards in green, and you're going to play those instead of Feral Instinct. But I feel like again we've kind of with Pristine Talisman. It's like I don't think it's a bad card. I think it's actually kind of cool, but I don't know if it's necessarily worth putting in your deck. I'll give it a 2.4 maybe. Yeah, let's go with something like that. Alexi's Cloak is 1 and a blue for an enchantment aura with flash, and it enchants a creature. Enchanted creature has Shroud. That's interesting. That is interesting. So giving a creature Shroud at flash speed. So it's like a protection instant, but it's a protection instant that continues to protect over time. I don't hate that. I really don't. The problem The problem with that is that I think the biggest problem is that it's an enchantment. Because there aren't. Because what deck are you putting this in, right? That really cares. Like, how can you play this to do more than just be a protection spell? And maybe it's fine that it's just a protection spell. I don't think it is. I think you want a little bit more out of your protection spells than just this. You want it to be an instant that also goes into your graveyard that you can use for Tolarian Terror. You want it to also give a power and toughness boost to make a Bogle's effect better. You want it to be an equipment so it counts towards your artifact count. There's all sorts of things that I think you'd prefer this to be that are little tweaks that will just help to synergize with a larger game plan than just having a protection spell. But it's still a protection spell that sticks. And that's all right. It's an instant speed and it sticks around. I kind of want to grab myself a copy. I don't know if it's necessary for Pauper, but I think this may be kind of an underrated commander card when you think about it. Yeah, I think I'm going to write this one down as a card I should probably just grab. Alexi's Cloak. Alexi's Cloak. Interesting. As far as Pauper goes, I just don't think you'd play it. Even the decks that you might play it in, like the decks that care about enchantments, the heroic decks or the Bogle's decks, those don't really play blue. I suppose that the Bogle's decks could make blue happen, but the reason you play Bogle's is because they already have hexproof. So you don't really need this card for those. And the heroic decks are mono white almost exclusively. So there's no real reason to play it in that. And it also screws up your game plan because once the creature has Shroud, it's not hexproof, it's Shroud. So you can't put anything else on it. You can't target your own guy either. So it kind of where does it go? You'd have to put it more in a deck where a creature does enough of its own thing that it doesn't really need anything else once you've protected it once. And there's certainly creatures that I can think of in Pauper that I would want to put that on. You know, you could put that on a Tolarian Terror, and who cares about the Ward 2? You've got Ward of Infinity. You could put that on a Cryptic Serpent, and then it's like an even better Tolarian Terror. You could put it on a Packdoll Terror and now have an untargetable way of continuing that drain. And those are all cool things. But Pauper has so many. I think I've talked about this a while ago on the show, but part of the thing about Pauper is that the very few of the individual cards are that powerful to the point that you would need to protect them all that much. Like, sure, a Packdoll Terror is a incredibly powerful card. Sure, a Cryptic Serpent is an incredibly powerful card. But a lot of those decks, they all play 4 copies of them. And if one goes to the graveyard or is killed by something, you find the next one, or you reanimate it out of the graveyard again. You don't really need to protect your cards as much because you'll just find other ones. Like, this is a game of value. This is a format of value, of drawing a bunch of cards, of finding the pieces that are able to synergize and build things. And it's much less about any one individual creature, which is why I think this is much better for something like Commander, where you only have one copy of every creature in your deck, outside of obviously the have any number of that creature in your deck variants that we have. But each individual creature, and because it's also all Magic's history, each individual creature has a lot more value as a single piece, and a lot higher quality as a single piece in a deck. And Pauper just doesn't have that as much. There are certainly protection spells that are played in Pauper. You know, we'll play Origin of Metal Bending, but part of the reason that card is good is because it's a protection spell that's also a naturalize. and I think you're probably going to play it as a naturalize more often than the protection spell. There's Apostle's Blessing in white, or it's a white Phyrexian, so you can play it in any color deck. But you play that because it's very cheap. You can play a single generic mana. You can play it in any deck, and you can also play that very offensively because it gives protection from a color. So you can use it offensively to say, well, none of your black creatures can block, and then you just swing in on a black deck and you hit them for damage. Shroud doesn't give you that option. I don't know. I like it. I like this, just not for Pauper. We'll give it a. I'm gonna give it like a 1.9 in Pauper. It's really not great there. I'd give it a much higher score for Commander though. Curious Pair is 1 and a green for a 1/3 human peasant. And it also has an adventure strapped to it that is Treats to Share for a single green mana. It's a sorcery that says create a food token. Two very normal things on a single card. I like that it gives you more stuff on one card. This is a turn 1 play and a turn 2 play in Pauper. That's kind of nice. And you've only spent 1 card to do it. That's cool. The problem is neither of these cards are all that good. The like creating a food token is things that a lot of other cards do incidentally, and so I don't really want to spend my 1 turn making 1 food token. That's not all that great. And then I really don't want to spend my turn 2 on a 1/3 vanilla creature. So cool that it gives you extra stuff. There's more card in your 1 card. That's a form of card advantage. That's really nice. But neither one of these things is useful enough to really matter. So we will give this a 1.4 and move on. Scrapskin Drake is 2 and a blue for a 2/3 zombie Drake with flying. This creature can only block creatures with flying. Okay. It's fine. It's like a Windrake, slightly better than a Windrake in some ways, that it has that extra point of toughness. Slightly worse than a Windrake in other ways, in that it can only block creatures with flying. Very, very normal, very nothing magic card. We will give it a 1.6. Move on to Hill Giant Herd Gorger, which is 4 in double green for a 7/6 giant. When this creature enters, you gain 3 life. The life gain's all right, but the creature is very expensive. So when you want to gain life, it's because, as we mentioned, you're playing against those aggressive decks, those mono red decks, those black burn decks, those just mono black sacrifice can be really aggressive and fast. Slivers can be really aggressive and fast. And when you're going up against those decks, Slivers isn't always fast, but it can get it's at least a very aggressive deck. When you're dealing with that amount of damage at those relatively early turns in the game, you don't have time to get to 6 mana to gain 3 life. And the only decks that I'm thinking that you might play something like this in are the mono green stompy stuff, or maybe even like the Gruul ramp, or I guess like Tron, Monster Tron. The problem with a lot of these options, Tron, you don't necessarily want this because it has double pips, and Tron can with Prophetic Prisms and Chromatic Stars or something, they have ways of making a single color here or there. It's a lot harder in Tron to make a double color. So this you don't really want this in Tron, because also let me show you another card here, and I think this is going to kind of be my answer for all these decks that I'm talking about. But you have this card, you have Brambleworm, which costs I guess it costs more, doesn't it? Yeah, this is 6, this is 7. 7 mana, so okay, well, it's a little bit different here. I thought this cost 6, but 7 mana, you still get the 7/6. You gain 5 life when it enters. It's got a couple of keywords on it, and then it also has a thing you can do from your graveyard. So if you mill this into your graveyard with Malevolent Rumble or something, or even if somebody kills this and it goes to the graveyard, you can still do something with it, and that's pretty good too. I like Brambleworm a lot. I've got Brambleworm in my mono green monster Tron deck. So you don't really play this in Tron. I don't think you really play this in Gruul Ramp, because again, you could just cascade into probably something better. Not, I guess not Brambleworm, but well, maybe Brambleworm with Maelstrom Colossus. But I just think you have better things that you can cascade into for sure. And then the other decks, they just want to play a life gain thing that is much cheaper and faster to get. Your Weather the Storms, your pulsive. Oh God, what is it called? Pulse of Marasa. There you go. Like Muraganda. No, not that one. Pulse of Marasa. That gains you life for a much cheaper mana cost, and it also gets you a creature or land out of your graveyard, which can be useful too. This thing is not very good. It's a vanilla 7/6, and the life gain is okay, but too late to really matter. We will give this a 1.5. Dimir Informant is 2 and a blue for a 1/4 human rogue. When this creature enters, you surveil 2. We have definitely done this card before. I'm almost positive. We're going to skip this one. It's not very good. Impetuous Sun Chaser is 1 and a red for a 1/1 human soldier with flying and haste, and this creature attacks each combat if able. Whoo. Huh. How do we feel about this? How do we feel about this one? These are nice keywords, flying and haste. It's gonna generally get in for combat damage. Like, what deck are you playing where this doesn't get in for combat damage? Fairies, I guess, but fairies are gonna let this guy go through because they want to attack the next turn with their fairy that they can flip into a ninja. So I'm pretty sure you're just going to get in for damage basically all the time. That's not a problem. At least the first couple turns when you put this thing down. But then at some point, this thing attacking each turn if able is really going to lose its appeal. You know, you're going to get overwhelmed at some point. You want to block with this guy, and he just can't block. He's got to attack each turn if able. And that's not great. That's not great. Now, I'm thinking about like loading this guy up with equipment or auras. Is that something you can do? And then he attacks every turn, but you'd want him to attack every turn anyway to get the boosts. Okay, maybe you're talking a little bit, but I think he's just a little bit limited in his capabilities. He's also a 1 toughness creature, and that's not great. He's a 1/1 for 2 mana. That's not great. He can get picked off by a lot of different things. And you'll feel bad that you spent the mana on this. That being said, 2 mana flying haste in red is not something you get every day. So I kind of dig it, but not enough to really care all that much. I'm gonna give him a 2.1, and we're on to our final official card of the day. It's Lowland Oaf. Been called worse. It's 3 and a red for a 3/3 giant warrior. So it's a hill giant, but has other stuff on it. You can tap to have target goblin creature you control get +1/+0 and gain flying until end of turn. Sacrifice that creature at the beginning of the next end step. Originally from Lorwyn. We just went back to Lorwyn, and it was nice. And we got some other creatures that kind of do this too. The giants that throw things, and and then the idea that I like the flavor of it. It's thrown, it gets some power boost, or if it's like Brian Stoutarm, you get lifelink out of the deal, so you deal damage that way. But you tossed the guy, so the guy has to die as well. You get this kind of fling effect. That's fun. That's fun. Your goblins decks in Pauper just don't want this guy. He's much too slow. A hill giant that the next turn taps to make one of your goblins more powerful. Your goblins are all generally 1/1 guys, like maybe a slightly powerful, but generally about 1/1 guys. So you're tapping this 3/3 guy to make one of your 1/1 guys into a 2/1 flyer. The math just doesn't really math on that one. This is not a good card. I guess if you had some kind of combat damage trigger or dealing combat damage to a player triggers, whether it's an enchantment or an artifact on your side that does that, or if you have a goblin that does something like that. I just don't think there are a whole lot of those in Pauper. And yeah, I really don't like this card. I'm going to give it a 1.1. I am really going to give it that because the Hill Giants are really bad. 4 mana for a 3/3 creature, not very good at all. And then yeah, the idea that you might be going down on power by tapping this guy to give something else a power boost that is already very weak. That sucks. If he gave +3 and flying, then I'd go, okay, well, at least you're still getting his same power attached to another creature. That's something at least, but this is terrible. No. 1.1. I feel justified. Let's do a bonus card and then get out of here. Ravenous Ravenous Lucrocta. I'm gonna say Lucrocta. No, it's not. It's not that. It's Ravenous Lucrococta. Lucocrocta. Yeah, there's another syllable in there. Anyway, it's a 2/4 beast with vigilance, and it's got monstrosity 3 for 6 and a green. So if this creature is not monstrous, you put 3+1/+1 counters on it, and it becomes monstrous. So it doesn't allow you to do it multiple times. So you get a 2/4 for 4 with vigilance, and for another 7 mana, you can make it a 5/7. That's not very good. That's not very good at all. That's probably why it's 2 pennies from Journey into Nyx. Yeah, that sucks. That sucks a lot. And the art's okay, but it's not good enough to save this card. This card's pretty bad. I'm gonna give this a 1.1. Yeah. I'm gonna give it the same as that giant. It's better than the giant though. At least it has vigilance. I'm still giving it a 1.1. I really don't like this card. I'm going to do another bonus card, just something a little better than that. We'll see. Miss Moon Griffin here is 3 and a white for a 2/2 Griffin with flying. When this creature dies, exile it, then return it, and then return the top card of your graveyard to the battlefield. Ugh. Well, I don't know. Actually, hang on. I scoffed for a second, and I scoffed because I really don't like cards that care about the order of your graveyard. I like that they changed the rules where you can just do whatever you need to with your graveyard. It sucks to have to remember the exact order of your graveyard. It's the more graveyard cards you use, the less organized your graveyard will be, right? Like, oh, I got to take the Faithless Looting out here because I'm using the flashback on it. Oh, I've got to mill these cards and then grab one of them, and it just ends up that your graveyard gets jumbled over time. And that's fine for any like modernish deck that care, like not modern, but any like contemporary deck that doesn't care about the order of graveyards, and we've gotten away from those rules. But some of these old cards will go, hey, I care, and if you play an old card that cares about the order of your graveyard, you have to care about the order of your graveyard when it comes to playing in official capacities, because that's just cheating at that point. If you mess up and shuffle up your graveyard and go, oh wait, the good card was on top, weird, that's crazy. Yeah, no, you're not going to get away with that. Here's what I like though. Obviously this, okay, I guess I got to go through more of the bad stuff first before I can get to the good stuff. Obviously this kind of sucks, right? It's a 4 mana 2/2 flyer. That's bad. Those are just not great stats at extremely high cost. Not amazing there. But what is interesting is that if and when this thing dies, I like this trigger that you're exiling the creature and then you return the top creature card of your graveyard to the battlefield. What you can do is when this dies, or maybe you have a sacrifice outlet, or you just know that your opponent's going to kill it in some way, or you block with it. That's also a thing you can do. Block with it and know that it's going to die then. What you can do is use one of the Lord of the Rings cycling cards, or any way of discarding a creature, but those just cycle, so they discard themselves. You cycle one of those in response to this trigger. And so you discard that card and you go find the land or whatever, and that goes into your hand. But now that is the top creature card in your library. And then this trigger happens, and you get to go and find that exact card and put it onto the battlefield. That's sweet. Imagine, okay, if you're playing in white, the Eagles are the easiest one to do, but let's say you're playing Orzhov. So you throw the Troll of Khazad-dûm in there, and now you get your 6/5 with Super Menace. Awesome. That's cool. That's what I love. I think that is a rad interaction. The problem is that you have to play this 4-mana garbage to be able to get that cool interaction. And there are other ways of using that kind of trick too. The most obvious one that some of the dredge decks will use is that you cast Exhume, and then in response to Exhume, you cycle the troll. And now the troll goes in there, and now you have a troll in your graveyard, and it gives them less of an opportunity to exile your entire graveyard before that happens. And this is a fun way of doing that too. Like, imagine you have already a really cool creature in your graveyard, and you sacrifice this or have this die in some way, and your opponent in response goes, "Oh, I'll use Thraben Charm and exile your entire graveyard." You let that go through. Graveyard gets exiled. Now you have no targets. But while this is still in the stack, then you cycle and you put something in your graveyard. And now it's the only card in your graveyard. It's a creature card, and now it comes out to the battlefield. That's cool. That's really cool. That's a neat thing that you can do. This card's still bad, though. It's still really bad, but it's interesting. And I do like interesting cards, and you do get points for interesting here. So I'll end up giving you a 2.3 when you really should be something more like a 1.4, right? So I'm giving you some points for being interesting. Not a very good card, but a card I don't know. I mean, obviously I laid out the case here. You can tell me whether you think this card is garbage or maybe there's a little bit something to it. Don't play it in your decks though. Just think about it. Like, roll it around in your head instead of putting it into a deck. Do that instead. We'll see you next time. Bye.